start here. This is just a few introduction slides, and then we'll be looking at use cases. But we'll start from the use case diagram. And even though it's called a use case diagram, it's actually plural, it's use cases diagram, but they always call it use case diagram. So, so don't get thrown by the singular. All right, so introduction to requirements. So we have business requirement, focus on goals, needs, and objectives, okay, stakeholder requirements, solution requirements, and transition requirements. So these are the four main categories. Okay, the solution requirements always breaks down into the functional requirements and the non-functional requirements. So you can, I think there's another slide that fills this in a little bit more, but when you focus on the functional requirements, it's saying user functionality, put a comma after that, and also system interaction. Because there's lots of requirements. It's like, well, what if my, like the example we had earlier today, the two examples we had earlier today, what if my service is tax management, so that you, as running your business, you can figure out your interstate tax liabilities. That was literally a database system, a service that was being provided, where the client's computer system had to be able to connect to my computer system to provide that particular blend of laws that were pertinent to the industry or context of the individual client. So focus on user functionality, yes, but comma, inter-system functionality as well. It's not just about the user, there's systems involved. One computer system talking to another computer system. Go on to Amazon or eBay, they've got an order processing system that's talking with a payment verification system. That order processing system is talking with into some type of shipping. What do they call that? With the I'm thinking in terms of accounts receivable and all that. Inventory. There you go. With the order system is tied in with the inventory system, which is related to the shipping system. Those are all separate computer systems. Okay, so functional requirements are both users and inter-system. Non-functional requirements focusing on the quality of the system. All right, so this is performance. It can include security, but it's predominantly performance. And non-functional requirements are almost always going to be numeric in nature. They're going to give numbers. And what's the response time? So Google, for example, when they decided where to put their data centers in the United States, they had a quality requirement that said that regardless of where you are in the United States, you should be able to get a response in 2 seconds. So they organized their data centers around providing the location of their data centers around providing a 2-second response. And then they changed their algorithms, adjusted their algorithms so that they could look back on, let's see, what's their best guess at what this person wants based on their previous search history. We know that that'll eliminate terabytes worth of data that, it's like, I'm not going to go look up how to manage a nuclear power plant. I just never queried for that. So there's lots of stuff in the pool of information that Google knows and is tracking that none of us in this room are interested in. So that eliminates about 95% of the information that's out there. There's only about 5% that we actually ask about or inquire about. So they can presume something about us that limits how wide their search has to be.
Actually, I got Google Analytics certified.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So what you're talking about is definitely what that is.
Yep.
Learning about how to discover the customers, the client's needs.
Mm-hmm. So that's neat. How long ago did you get the analytics certification?
I did it in December.
Okay, recently.
Yes.
Very recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in that one. I'll have to ask you more about it later on. I work for a nonprofit in addition to doing contract constructor work at MITS. So we've got some analytic needs that we've been playing around with. All right, so the idea of working through this then is business requirement first. It's very high level, maybe very short, very simple, sweet. Stakeholder requirements is just what is their time frame? What is their objective? What is their high level need? So it still stays rather high level. Then the solution requirements, now all of a sudden we're into tons and tons and tons of detail. Okay, so the solution requirements are where the bulk of the work is. And after we pretty much outlined, okay, this is what the solution is, then there's need to think about the transition requirements. So from the diagram earlier this morning, transition requirements are focused on activities during what phase?
Deployment.
Of deployment, exactly. So that's that point in time where we're not in the current state, we're not in the future state, we're in this intermediate, upgrading everything state. All right, so business requirement, the ideas, goals, objectives, and outcomes that describe why a change has been initiated. So it's a lot of the why behind it and how the success will be assessed. Like, what's the success criteria from the business perspective? It usually boils down to money. Did we save $1 million? Did we save $2,000? What's the scope of the impact of the change? Stakeholder requirements describe, and this is a key thing. Before you can know who to elicit requirements from, in order to form the solution requirements, you got to know who are the stakeholders anyway. So just going through it, that identification, stakeholder identification process is critical for the project manager and it's critical for the business analyst. All right, solution requirements from a functional perspective describes what the product or system or service will provide from the end user perspective. So that's true, especially from an agile perspective. But as I said earlier, you've got some businesses that are oriented around providing a back-end service where they have business analysts working, and it's not going to be oriented around end user perspective, meaning physical people working with the software interface. The end user perspective, it might be easier to think of it as the end client perspective. But whatever their need is, that's what we're oriented towards. Some of it's system, some of it's user. All right, non-functional requirements are also referred to as quality of service. So you think of speed, what's another word for speed that you're going to see frequently? Speed is actually very infrequent. Rather take that name out and put another one in there. What's the more common word that's used for performance response time? It's a latency. Let's see, you guys see that name pop up? Response time or latency?
Generally in IT though, I don't see that in business too often, but I did. But generally in IT, yes.
Yeah, latency is definitely the technical term. Okay, response time is going to be more the business terminology. And I've never seen a document that ever talks about speed. It's always response time or latency. Okay. Availability, what does that mean? That's a common term for every computer system everywhere.
Up and running.
Yep, is it up and running and specific? So that's the whole point of availability. And it's got a very specific measure to it.
I don't know. I know the DBAs normally shut down to do backups at a certain time and bring it back up early AM. I don't know if that's.
Yep, so that's planned downtime.
Okay.
So there's two concepts in availability. One is planned downtime, such as what you just described. Then there's unplanned downtime. The unplanned downtime is the no-no space. It's like, oh, the system went down. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not good. Okay. All right, and the measure of this is how many minutes of the year was the system actually running. So I don't remember how many minutes there are in a year, 365 days. But it,
Days.
yeah. So take that number of minutes, multiply it out. So I always work with availability in terms of the downtime minutes, because then it actually means something. So like if you're the executives that I come in with this business as the VA, if I come into your office or into the meeting and say, hey, would you spend $120,000 to improve your availability from like 98.6% to 99.1%? You're gonna do the quick math in your head and say, you want me to pay $120,000 to improve by 0.3%? Really? All right, so that is what availability is in terms of its formal measurement. If you flip it the other way and talk about the downtime minutes, that's when you emotionally engage people. You know, this is taking into account the soft skills, because nobody's going to react to like 0.3% improvement. You gotta be kidding me. But if you say, well, I can reduce your downtime from 120 minutes per year down to 60 minutes per year, like, okay, you're gonna cut it in half, you got my attention. What do you want to do? All right, so part of this is just knowing when you look at measurements, which angle to take so that it matters. Okay. So that it matters to your audience. All right, so a few other items in here. The quality of the system is viewed from these ways. Some of these are measurable, some are not. Flexibility is not very easy to measure. Security is pretty easy. Was there a successful break-in or not? Or denial of service is a common form of attacking. You want to shut down somebody's business, you bombard their servers, their application servers or websites with tons and tons of messages. So that'll swamp the server to the point where it can't respond to normal business requests and operate as planned. It's too swamped for responding to all of these phony messages. That's a denial of service attack. Some of these are soft and not traditionally part of non-functional. Think of them like easy to use. That's a very subjective thing. Like you're not going to build a contract on was it easy to use. Transition requirements, current state to future state, we already covered this. The whole point is the last bullet is that the requirements are temporary in nature, meaning the activity associated with those requirements is temporary. All right, if we look at a business requirements document, so who's actually worked with a BRD or a portion of a BRD?
With Oracle, they have this, what they call application implementation methodology, but it was basically Oracle had like a template of different documents that made it easier for the business analysts to like say, this is your functional requirements, this is your design for your conversion, or if it was an interface, they had like different documents for those things.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So they had a lot of different documents.
Yeah,
Are they collectively considered to be the BRD, or was it like multiple different types of BRDs?
It was different types of BRDs. I think how the business analysts looked at it, I think there was something that let them know, okay, this is a conversion, then shoot this off to the developer to do the analysis of what's necessary for building this conversion of where you pulling the data from the vendor, sending a file, and where it's going for a interface table or something.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the whole concept of the BRD, and it could be a living document, or it could be more of a fixed in time, or doing a BRD for this project period, that's it. Maybe the project is actually part of a larger system, so there's a larger BRD to work with. But business requirements document has the solution requirements as indicated here. Here's where I mentioned the inter-system functionality. in terms of functional requirements, user as well as intersystem. As you walk through all of this, the use case diagram and use cases are very common techniques for specifying the requirements. We're going to do a use case diagram here in a little bit. And then next week we'll do the use case for one of the use cases in the use case diagram. Okay. All right, now when we flip over to Agile, the BRD is typically replaced with a product backlog and associated user stories. So the BRD has a lot less presence. The use cases diagram is still valid because it helps paint the picture and what are we actually doing in the system viewpoint. All right, so thinking about use cases. So what do use cases communicate? It's functionality the system provides to users. It's core functions or services that one subsystem may provide to another subsystem. So this is its intersystem execution. Over here, we look at intersystem functionality here. Intersystem functionality is this second bullet of core functions and services that one subsystem provides to another subsystem. So being able to understand, okay, what are my subsystems? That's always a question that has a solid answer in every IT environment, in every computer network environment. You can have a subsystem for reporting, you can have a subsystem for, like in Workday, to take that one as an example. They'll have a subsystem for hourly pay tracking, a subsystem for job grade management. They'll have all of these different subsystems that are related to each other, but there's specific software for each of those subsystems. All right, so who initiates what systems do we depend on? What are the core functionalities? These are some of the questions that come out through a use case. So the key item on the bottom here, business people and technical people can use the use case diagram. So that's one common piece of information that everybody can look at and understand together. But that's part of why it's really critical. All right, so how to document use cases. Starts off as a diagram to show interaction between actors and use cases. There's various tools available. And then the use cases themselves, each individual use case can be written in Word or Excel or whatever tool is being used. So here's an example use case diagram from just a basic notation perspective. So you have some system boundary that's the box. And then each of the ovals here is a separate use case. The actors are the stick people. So if you, in your work environments, have you seen anything with the stick people in the ovals?
Yeah.
What's that?
More Visio.
In Visio, right? So, and I think you nodded. All right, so you've worked with this too? Okay, good, or at least have exposure to it.
Exposure mostly.
Okay, all right, so we'll actually go through, break one of these in a few minutes. So, part of this is you can say like, hey, on your resume, you can add in under educational experience, business analysis, doing a student registration project, student registration system project. That, the class's theme so that you can talk to that entire project, just as you would if you're graduating from college and referring to various projects. So even if you've never did it before, all the pieces fit together. So and for both of you, you've worked with these. Is this more from a user perspective or have you put these together?
When I was working for Oracle Consulting, initially when I started, like we had the training in Arizona, and we used their case tool, computer aided system engineering tool of Designer 2000. So my first assignment was going to, I think it was Austin, Texas. So it was their public utilities department. So we sat with the users and we actually did the business process modeler, and then broke out into the swim lanes, and then they had the ERD diagrammer, then we had the entity, relationship diagrams. And then it popped out forms, reports, and all that stuff.
So it sounds like they didn't necessarily start at the high level like this.
They actually, the business users for the utility department, they were actually doing like descriptions of each of what they needed in the complete process. So
Got it.
It kind of broke things down similar to this.
Okay, similar.
Similar.
Good point. And were you using this then or writing these?
Something like this.
Okay.
We had a business acquisition that I was PM over.
Mhm.
And I had to be able to work with various groups and divisions. So showing how this is your part, pretty much like in swim lane
Oh, yeah.
aspect, this is your part, this is how you interact with this part and so forth.
Mhm.
But not so much in the stick figures, but I've seen this.
Okay. Okay. So basically, good familiarity across the board. And it sounds like a good experience doing it together as well.
Yeah.
Right, the use case actors, there's always a primary actor and a secondary actor. So the primary actor just means that person triggers the use case. Okay. So that's a key concept here. The primary actor triggers the use case. And the secondary actor doesn't need to be a person, it can be a system. So when we look through the notation here, we've got our actor, use case, association, and then we've got these three qualifications that we'll see some examples of shortly here. We've got the special case of extending a use case, common behavior for uses, containing means includes. So we'll see, it's easier to see what this looks like on the examples that follow. All right, so you get a patient, make an appointment. All right, so I did check the print here, so I think this is legible on your slides. I looked over some of these to see if I've got to provide some full page pictures here. But this one takes a look at extends. Okay, so when you take a look at just the extend right here, this will get a sense of the use cases as well. You get a post office and you've got the registrar. So the registrar, one could say, is going to be triggering this use case to distribute information to students. This is a real general statement. Okay. So if you extend that, well, distribute what kind of information? You got transcripts up here, you got a fee schedule, and when are your course fees going to be paid, and when are they expecting it to be paid? And then there's distributing the class schedules. All right, so we've got three different types of information here. And all of these relate to something that's going to be mailed to the student through the post office. All right, so trigger goes this way, and all of these three are variations of distributed information. Obviously, the framework of sending something to the post office is pretty generic. But the exact reports that we need, think of each of these three as being reports. Each of those is very unique and specific. As if we look through a few of these others, you've got student and financial institution in terms of obtained student grants or student loan, reimburse course fees or pay fees. Okay, so go through there. It's like, okay, got different non-person entity actors here, and we've got person actors. Go over to here when we look at, instead of, oh, there's another extends here. If you look at uses, you get a data manager that's working with inventory data, the use case of inventory data, which is like, assuming inventory is the verb here. We're going to inventory some data, or get the data versus remove the data. this is going to use browse data. If we're going to export the data, then I'm going to use access data, which also uses browse data. Some scientist person here is going to be doing some integrated analysis, which will also involve browse data. Right, so this idea of uses just means that one use case can trigger execution of another use case. That's all it means. Whereas extends is much more in programming sense, object-oriented programming, where the child use case is here being implemented as an old perspective associated to the distributed information being the superclass. All right, so we've got uses, extends, and what was the other one? Includes. So includes, we don't have an example on here, but includes would be more of a container aggregation type perspective instead of a general service. And here uses means that browse data is a general service useful in a lot of different contexts. It was more of a container type relationship, then you'd be using the includes. Okay, so student registration system. Let's put some information on the whiteboard here before we put it on the sheet of paper. And then we will put together a use case diagram for a student registration system. So think of a university or college setting. What would their registration system need to be capable of doing? Okay. So use cases are really powerful because they communicate. Use case diagrams, I mean, are very powerful because they can communicate a lot of information in a short amount of attention. So you don't need to grab like an hour of somebody's time. You can give them a diagram, and within about 10 to 15 minutes, they can go, oh, I get it. Okay, so that's the power of good communication, is short time. All right, so what would the actors be and what would the use cases be? So if we were to just start putting some information on the board here, and I'll flip the camera to the board. So we don't need to pay attention to the details of extends, uses, and includes here. So what would the actors be?
Student.
Okay. Keep going, Nudge.
Learning institution.
And I'm going to do this in a brainstorm fashion here. Okay. So just put down ideas here.
Administrator.
So administrator. Okay.
We can say financial administrator.
Okay.
Business administrator. They're probably going to different areas.
Right. That was going to be my next question. So which one did you want to mention here? So you mentioned two, though. I caught the financial. What was the other one?
Yes, I'll say financial.
Okay.
Say professors anywhere in there.
They would probably be involved. What type, and as we think about this, now what are the use cases? We can keep adding some actors here. But as we think about use cases, add a class.
Obtaining financial aid.
I'll just do FA for financial aid
Transcripts.
in terms of,
um,
what's the verb? Use case will always have a verb and a noun.
oh,
So,
um,
and the actors are always going to be, well, I shouldn't say always, but they're all, they will always be a noun.
Acquiring transcript. Because acquiring is a verb.
Right. So this is, who would trigger that one?
That is going to be the student that's going to request that.
Okay, so why don't we do a transcript, request transcript,
Yes,
or obtain transcript?
yes,
Either way works.
all acronyms.
Obtain, what's that?
That's all acronyms.
So obtain financial.
Obtain, or I was gonna say obtain again, but I don't know if you want to use the same
Yeah, I
word.
was just noticing that myself. I'll just stay with request right now. Press transcript.
And then create online account for student. I don't know.
So at some point, this, the student doesn't exist until there's a profile. Okay, so create the student account.
About attend orientation.
So that's an activity that happens. So how would you want to represent that from a soft student registration system perspective?
All this after that would occur after the registered orientation.
Because if you write a use case for attend orientation,
Well,
just want to
I guess-
capture additional
I
thoughts
guess
that you may
I
have
guess
there.
no for attend, but somewhere in there, there's an orientation, so that would fall under the faculty or the administrator to have that for the students.
There we go. Okay. So use case,
Schedule.
it's like provide orientation.
Mhm.
There could be several steps involved with that though.
I got another one. Anybody else have one before I throw it out?
I'll say sell books or sell materials. Books.
Yeah, there's course materials. So this would be, so when we word it from the view of the trigger, it's going to be the
Okay.
student, so it'd be more purchasing.
Okay.
So sometimes there are other materials. So just put that in there.
Market programs.
There we go. So market programs. And we can take about another two more over here and then as we look at that list, what actors would not be accounted for right now that would be involved in those use cases. We look at like market programs. Got a professor, got a
That-
financial administrator, got a learning institution, got a student.
The marketing programs from a college. That's going to be the, I want to say counselors in here somewhere.
So this is a counselor in terms of academic, choosing your
Yes,
courses.
academic counselors. But I'm still kind of stuck on who markets for the school.
Okay, so there's a concept related to that, just to try to draw a boundary there. And, we saw with our use case diagram, there's a system boundary, right?
Mhm.
So let's say the marketing happens magically.
Okay.
in our registration. So somehow the student has found out about the university,
Right, because that's the first thing. How do I know to go here? What got me here?
right?
So
So
it's a marketing
Mhm.
that is taking place.
right. So
Or
there's,
word of mouth. Somebody's doing it word of mouth or advertisement or something on that order.
Mhm. So marketing is definitely in there in terms of the overall operation of the university. Um, If we think about marketing the programs, how to put it within the context of enrollment, like adding classes, how would we change it slightly and say develop programs?
Okay.
Because then that has to be marketed and it also implies enrollment. Very direct.
Right.
So developing programs is always ongoing. And like you mentioned earlier, it is associated with a particular school within a university. Usually there's a school of engineering, school of humanities, school of music, whatever it is that the university is focusing on. But they have multiple schools under their university structure. All right, so
So with the counselor, I'm thinking of schedules.
okay, so we get to schedules. That's good because we're doing enrollments, we're adding classes, and and that's actually tied in with developing programs here. All right, so talk to me for a moment. What about schedules? Schedules for,
Fall or spring,
say again?
for fall or spring semester.
All right, so that would actually,
whenever some-
and here's where our terminology in English starts to break down, and it's not very easy to talk about this stuff. So let's talk about schedule, like for fall or spring, etc. So if you're the ones running the university, you're offering classes, that's the way we always talk about it. But it gets a little bit hard to understand. What do you mean by class? We're having class today because it's like 9:30, 3:30, and we're done. Like, oh, you mean the class business analysis? Oh, got it. Okay, there's two different definitions of the word class
Okay,
that
so
we use.
title.
So it gets actually I never came across that, consciously, I should say, until after I started teaching this class and just wanted to bring the student registration system in. It's like, oh, that's right, we do use that word very ambiguously.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that becomes into a mind map where it's gonna branch out.
Yeah, it is. If we did this in a mind map type fashion, that would be good. So why don't we call this a courses schedule?
Yes.
Because what we're actually doing is scheduling courses. And you might schedule 6 sessions, I'll throw that word in there, sessions, 6 sessions of, what would be one? Economics 101.
One thing I was wondering, is there any kind of rule in play where that you can't have a course schedule where you don't have a professor that's qualified to teach the course? I don't know if this should even come up in this discussion. But I was like, if you're gonna have a music program and you're like, oh, we don't have any musical,
So I can see that being based off of having a professor. So now we have professors under actors, and then how that would tie into the professor, because the schedule can't take place if we don't have a professor.
Right. So who has the responsibility then of qualifying the professors?
Well, you got your dean.
I-
That's-
Yeah, I think it'd be administrative, but more the dean as opposed to the administrative assistant, type thing. So you got a dean in there. Okay, let's start gluing some of this stuff together now. We'll see where it goes. there's enough related here that we can start filling in a sheet, and we'll fill this guy in. Starting with student here. So I'll just, I'll do this all in black, shows up really well. I usually plant the student over here. All right, so we got a student. What's one of the use cases?
Obtaining financial aid.
Okay, so what would be the other actor involved with obtaining financial aid?
The administrator of financial aid.
Yeah, so we'll call it the
Financial administrator.
financial administrator. Let's see, financial, let's do financial admin. Okay, so if we put that person over here, so we got a financial administrator. Okay, and we're putting in the obtain financial. Okay, so what does obtain financial aid look like? If we were to break that down a little bit.
Well,
You got,
you have FAFSA, you have seeking out grants. So you have either attending a class for FAFSA or going online and learning a FAFSA and how to apply for FAFSA.
mhm,
Then you have also seeking grants or scholarships.
mhm. Let's see, so those are different things you can do. So think about this from a systems perspective. All that's true.
Mhm.
That's the activity. Those are like meetings that a person would do or activity that a person would do. If you're in the university registration system, your registration system meaning enrolling for classes, financials is a big part of that. You're going to be able to choose any one of those items that you're talked about. So we've got the FAFSA and some grants. Universities usually provide grants based on any number of an interesting amount of criteria. They're very creative. Okay.
Missing your F in FAFSA after the S.
Yeah. Okay.
FAFSA.
FAFSA. Okay. It's been a while since I've had to do that. My kids are all out of the college space. One of them actually graduated from Moody Bible Institute, so she didn't have to go through the financial parts because their tuition is paid by an endowment fund.
Nice.
So she got her degree in leadership. Actually, a director of a state organization now. So it's a small one, but a growing one. Okay, so FAFSA, grants, obtaining FA. Think of the actions associated with this. Before, obtain is like, you can almost think of it, what are the verbs associated with the financials? In order to obtain it, you've got to
Research.
see what they are.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the verbs now. So you got to do some level of research. And this is the student doing the research.
Right.
Okay. There we go. Here's some keyword now. Got to apply for it, or it's not going to happen. Period. Right. So this is the applying for it would necessitate records being retained in the enrollment system, so that we can see how payments can be made for these courses. Payment and courses go hand in hand. They're never separated.
Qualify.
All right, there's qualify. So qualify in it's like it's almost like a review perspective.
Yes.
So if I could just, if you're qualified, that's subject to the review. by the financial administrator.
Right, when I speak of qualified too, that can involve where you have to communicate back with documentation, proof of documentation of your parents' income. How do I know that one so well?
All right, so when you apply, you're going to have to be able to provide certain information.
Correct.
Let's see. So this is the evidentials. So apply. You need the evidential. Qualify. Okay. All right, so let's work a couple of these on. All right. If we want to, so the obtain is a very broad space. It's got some steps into it. If we break this down at a level of granularity that makes sense for the use case so that we can store the appropriate information and provide the appropriate user interfaces. So when you think of a system, it's like we're providing user interface for people and we're providing data storage. Okay. So from that perspective, we'd said, we've got a few verbs here. What would be one of the, go back to the block down here. What would be one of the first actions to start off with obtaining financial aid? You don't want to just plant one circle in the middle here and say, oh, let's obtain financial aid. It's like, so what does that mean? It needs to be just a little bit more detailed, which is why I asked the verbs question. So if we pull this one out and say, let's do the apply. Okay, so the student has to apply for financial aid.
Now here's my question.
Go ahead.
Based on how you're referencing this on the board, I think of it in matter of steps. Step one, this is what you do. Step two, this is what you do. Is that necessary for a user case or no?
So when we do the use case, yes. When we do the use case diagram, no.
Okay, that's what I want to clear.
Okay. There is an implication of steps.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you look back at these notes over here, and
No, you don't have to go back to it because I remember you say implication, meaning that you pretty much take that into the account, that
Right.
that's already taken place. So I got
Yes.
that.
Okay. Okay. So let's start off here with the apply for financial aid. Use this to, as our reference point for adding in other use cases. All right, so the student has to trigger that so that the diagramming always, I don't know if it's informal or semi-formal, but the diagramming never shows arrows. You know, in these diagram examples that you've seen, there's no arrows. But when we go to rational rows, where we actually put this in, because we're going to put this in rational rows as part of our UML unit, they do arrows. Which I like the arrows because it's a little bit hard to figure out who's triggering this thing without an arrowhead. Who's triggering the use case here? All right, so apply for financial assistance or financial aid. All right, so what's going to happen? Student comes in, puts in their application information. What other actors involved with this?
Whoever would be reviewing that application,
So think of a non-person though.
I guess the system,
Mhm.
I guess the financial
Financial system.
system.
Yeah, there'd be some type of financial system involved. So we can put a financial assistant in here, financial system. So that still gets represented as a person.
That is the financial.
Like versus bank or
Right. So, yeah. All right, so student, financial system, financial administrator. So this is gonna get stored into here.
Mhm.
What else is gonna happen?
Then from the financial system to the financial administrator.
Right, so this same use case can store, and then within here, as you're thinking about the sequence of steps,
Right,
it's gonna have to send some type of notification over here,
yes.
or whether that's an active notification or whether it's just that this person is supposed to have a routine in their business process or workflow of going and checking every day.
Right.
Whichever way it works out, that's details. All right, so we've got to apply for financial aid. Okay, those are connected. All right, so after the person's applied for financial aid, what would be a use case in order to reach the goal of obtaining financial aid? This is just the apply for.
To obtain the financial aid, we have to have another system. And that would be to reach out to the government system, their system. So we have our internal system, but then you'll have an external too, to reach out to the government. So that's what a FOSSA comes in at.
Right. Let's see, so.
So would it be from,
So
Our
what's the
financial-
verb that happens between those two systems?
um,
This financial system, it must be
communicate with,
having some type of system interface with the, essentially it's going to wind up being the IRS
right,
financial systems in order to verify income, essentially.
well, interface is still a verb, it's an action.
Oh, yeah. So that'll be right, but the specific use case is to verify. In the interaction with the federal system, at the point of application.
Approval,
is
to
the-
get an approval.
What do they call it, like background checks? It's to do a qualification check. So there's probably some type of, what do you want to call it, with qualification check or something else?
So we're
Yeah.
still talking about the government.
Right, so throw the government financial system in here. And I don't know if it's technically part of the IRS or if it's handled through some Department of Education or however
Department
it
of
is.
Education.
What's that?
Department of Education.
Okay, it is the Department of Education. That works. Just so I can save some space here. Department of Education system. All right, so what would be the use case connecting these two together? This one's going to trigger it this way, where you go out there and come back around. This would be a validation. Yeah, validate claims.
And we don't have it over here.
All right, here's where this is just a starting point.
Okay,
So we're not limited by this at all.
okay.
So
You
validate
remind me.
claims. All right, so there's certain claims that are being made in here about income primarily that has to go and get validated between these two systems. All right, so whose responsibility is it to decide whether the financial aid is going to be provided or not?
Financial administrator.
Right, this person. So that means this person's got to do some type of review and send a response.
Right.
So that
So what-
sending, that review / send response, we can assume this happened at the same time or within the same use case. Just that might be a week or two after this point. So that this is a key. This and the other, and technically, this is a proposed the financial aid. You can always negotiate some of the financial aid.
And that's from the student to the financial administrator.
Exactly, there's some, so here's the proposed it's usually, as I recall with my daughters, and they've gotten these things, it's, here's the proposed. Okay. So take the D off there, propose financial aid package. Okay, so this is the financial administrator is going to start that off. And it's going to draw off of the financial system, obviously. And this is going to go back to the student. And then what would be another use case here to close the deal out?
The
What
close
the next steps?
Yeah, to obtain it. So either, the proposed financial aid package could be nothing. I'm
No,
going to propose nothing to you, or I'm going to propose this to you, meaning that the university is going to add some other, what do they call those? My daughter's
it's still
got this.
aid, still
Right,
aid.
right.
Um,
So there's a financial aid package that can include, so the FOSFA takes care of this for validation purposes, qualification. University says, happy with that now, we'll propose a financial aid package where you get, $2,000 off for good academic performance for last semester or for high school or whatever. So this person has a lot of flexibility to put in almost whatever they want under the general guidelines. So here there needs to be some type of acceptance, come to agreement.
mhm.
Okay, so there's an accept / revise. Just assume they take care of this. And this usually goes this way. So we still go back up to the financial system. Potentially, we don't necessarily need to for this stage. All right, so we've got a stake in the ground here, and let's do a quick time check. Where are we at on time?
322.
322. Okay. All right. So before applying for financial aid and after doing financial aid, how does this other stuff fit in here? The other stuff meaning I've actually got to do some enrollment right here. Where else is enrollment?
Where are you gonna get involved with?
This involves enrollment. This kind of involves enrollment as well. So these involve the enrollment process.
Where's your create student account gonna fall in there?
So what system should hold that?
The registration system.
Yep,
For the
registration system, and just so we be clear on what we want in that registration system. So we're talking about registration system. All right, so we'll have a student account. Makes sense,
Which is gonna consist, can you just use profile, student profile?
right? Student profile, it's typically the word that's used these days, account / profile. Okay, what else would be in that registration system?
The student badge number.
Yeah, so that would be some attributes there.
Okay.
So we'll get down to the
Okay,
attributes
all right.
later. So,
What about,
Class options.
you know,
Well, of course. options.
think about, yeah, all right, so course options you mentioned, right? All right, so in the registration system, I gotta have my courses listed. There's gotta be some type of course listing,
And then,
and it's gonna be, technically the course offering is the schedule. So there's a course listing, or more specifically, here's the 6 classes we're offering for this course, and here's the days when they're run. So it's the course scheduling, if you want to call it that.
then I think the student has to be assigned a dean to approve the classes.
Right, there's usually some type of approval criteria. So if we add a class here, there's usually has to be some type of approval.
what about housing and as well as their meal plans?
Yeah, let's stick to it. So totally agree that's needed. let's draw our system boundary around just the enrollment portion for this. All right, so registration system. We've got course listing, we've got students. All right, so let's focus on that for a moment. Again, we'd said that we needed to create an account. So let's put that down in this corner. So who, by the way, who's responsible? What actor is responsible for the registration system? Yeah, it's a semi-rhetorical question. So it's the registrar. So why don't we put the registration system in here, and we'll put the registrar. Let's see, think of how all this is going to fit together. We'll do the registrar right here. All right, so we said that the student has to create a profile. So the student does that, goes into the registration system. All right, so how would we refer to the providing the course listing? This is in the develop program space and courses schedule. So in other words, who's going to put the course listing in there? It doesn't happen by itself.
The registrar.
Student programmer.
So
Would
It's
it
an
be
option.
So go back to what we'd said earlier here.
Develop programs.
So somebody got to put the schedule together and choose the courses, make it available in the enrollment system.
would that be the dean?
Yep, the department head or the dean, however they work it out. The dean's obviously going to have the final say on approval. Department heads, I don't know if they're technically the same as the dean or different. So you want to go with the dean for approval?
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to actually develop the courses and come up with a listing? Is that the dean as well?
Yeah.
Okay, just like a definition on the dean. So the dean is going to be doing the, it's going to be providing the course approval, essentially. We're going to offer this course and this course and this course this next year. You know, the next semester we're going to add this other course, maybe take away another course. So the dean is also going to be responsible for staffing, meaning finding eligible professors. Okay. All right, so if we capture that whole aspect, we've got a registration system that's going to be able to store courses and probably going to move my registrar over a little bit. So let's just cross this out for a moment, call this the dean. Put the registrar over here, wherever the use cases blend to. Okay. So use case here is going to be what? So when we talk about develop programs, the developing is the overall action, but we're going to write requirements for this and turn it into a use case that the software developer can go and implement. The develop programs is going to be could be as simple as we could put it in here as simple as just manage courses. Manage courses meaning add, remove, delete. Okay. Since it's the dean, its course is only for that specific school. So there's managing courses. Right, so that means now there's a course listing in the registration system. So now the student can go through and do this add class. So create profile. Do we want to stick with the add class? Yeah, there's probably some business rules in here that matter. So let's do add class, even though I can put a space between there. So add class, and we're reading out of here, and we're writing into the registration system. Okay. Obviously, you can do the drop class. That'd be a separate use case. Okay. All right, so how does financial aid and payment relate to enrollment here? So what are we missing?
Well, based on the payment of financial aid, it's going on accredited hours. So now you can only go with as much financial aid that you have to pay for the classes.
Right.
So how does that work? I would still, go ahead.
Does the registrar at this point get involved to say this?
Yep. If I remember right, because it's been a few years, but it's still not that many yet. Every time after the course is developed, after my daughters have enrolled in their course, we go to the registrar's office. That's where payment's made. Or it's some office right next to the registrar's office. They're closely tied with each other.
Cashiers.
Yeah, it's cashier technically is where we go. They've got a little office right next to the registrar. All right, so let's put our registrar back in here. Just move that office over a little bit. All right, so we've got a registrar that after adding classes, and dropping classes, there's some financials that are involved here. So we're talking about at the back end, it's like, okay, here's how much you owe. So that is going to tie back into the financial system, right? So the registrar can provide a payment plan. I mean, there could be a blend of loans, grants, FAFSA, but whatever that blend is, the registrar is going to be able to see, here's how much you owe after everything's said and done. So this is going to be a payment. And maybe the payment is zero, but just acknowledgement of zero is fine too. But here's your payment plan options. You can either pay it all up front or stage it out over the month or however you want to do it. So payment plan options, registrar will trigger this. It's probably based on some business rules, so you can think of that as a weak sense. That's taking input from the registration system, and it's going to blend in the financial system as well. Make this guy loop around here, and it's going to go back to the student. At some point, the university is going to want its money. The portion due from the student, if any. Usually there's something due. I'll just make this a little bit heavier. So this is the primary factor in that sense. Okay. So what else is the registrar going to do though? The registrar is also responsible for deciding when is enrollment started and when is it ended. Because enrollment just doesn't happen. It's got a very specific schedule to it. So the enrollment schedule. Set the enrollment schedule. That's going to go from the registrar over into the registration system. Okay, so if we've got the dean working with the courses, we've got a registrar, then it's like, okay, dean, you're done with your activity. I'm going to set the enrollment schedule and activate that now. So any students who come in and create a profile can go ahead and apply. So we haven't done like apply to the university. Okay, but so there's usually an application step, and yes, you're accepted. Okay, so just kind of assume that for a moment. And then the student can add classes and drop classes. Usually they're going to be applying for financial aid in parallel. I don't think that they require this to be a done deal before the selection of classes, but it's been a while. Okay. So I add direct classes. In parallel, the student is doing the apply for any financial aid, system check, proposed financial aid package, accept, revise, and then bring together the financial world and the enrollment world. Say, okay, here's the payment plan options. So does that segment make sense? Missing anything? We can expand outside of what's on here, which is good to do because we haven't covered. It's like, how do I get my schedule? How do I get my transcript?
Well, as far as the transcript at this point,
there is no transcript.
Right, we're beyond
we just
that.
enrolled it.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I do need to get my schedule. So the student should be able to get scheduled. And that could happen. It's like, do you want to, we could say that the get scheduled is a part of adding the class and dropping a class. To get your schedule updates. These use cases could actually trigger another use case, which is really called provide schedule, provide an updated schedule.
But why couldn't those just both be one use case? Add, drop,
class, drop class.
Classes, yes.
The functioning are going to happen with a space and time between them. And there's criteria for dropping a class that's different for adding a class. So the business rules behind these are very different. So that's why you want to keep them separate. The thing is that they're like distant cousins instead of close cousins.
I think the drop class happens like when you find out you messed up on the midterm. and you say, there's no, I gotta stop this.
Right. And they'll take a 20% loss in money to stop it at that point in time because you realize, well, I probably should have stopped it a month earlier when I could have got 80% of my money back instead of 20%.
The last things I see.
So business rules is a really key thing. So I've got that my mind here. So, but let me just keep going with your thought. But business rules separate use cases. And separate one use case from another. I'll just scratch that note on the bottom. Because if we haven't gotten the business rules, we'll be getting into that next week. Go ahead.
Well, the last thing I see is just that providing the orientation and purchase of the books and materials. And the books and materials are still going to come through that financial aid portion of it. But then you also have, which we look like we're going to have to continue on with the professor, and we didn't add.
Oh, that's right. Where'd the professor go? We could have classes with all the professors.
Because the academic counselor primarily helps to set schedules too. to give you some kind of guidance on which direction you want to go.
Okay,
But if you have your, what's it, the classes that are required, the one-on-one, the 100s and the one-on-one classes,
Mhm.
you really don't need the academic counselor through that part, because you have to take that.
right. Mhm.
But definitely, I can see the professor still having their part in it, as well as the books and materials and providing the orientation.
Okay, so let's, for the purpose of what we're focusing on here, let's look at the professor and counselor aspect here,
Okay.
as you're mentioning that in. So where does the professor fit in this?
Well, I think the dean is the one that's finding the talent to teach a class, so wouldn't the dean assign the professor to be connected to a class?
Right, so we could put the professor over here, taking exactly what you said. I'll just say prof. There's some verbal dialogue that happens between them. We don't need to capture that. But this person is going to get updates from managed courses. Like, here's your schedule. This is what we agreed to. There's verbal discussion going this way. And there's what they agree to. So this person's managed courses should basically kick the schedule out to this guy or this gal. So what was the other item here? This was the professor. Let's see. We can put on here like get schedule. I don't need to be adding a class or dropping a class in order to get my class schedule. Should be able to go anytime. A counselor should be able to go anytime, and a student can go anytime to look at the schedule of courses. So we're running out of room down in this cluster, so I'll just loop it around up here. And I'll put it in a different color just because it's going to be a little hard to see. So initiate that. That's going to come out of the registration system. It said that we've got an academic counselor involved here as well. Academic counselor should be able to also get the schedule. So no problem with that. We're probably about 3:30 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's stop here. We'll take a look at this and we get together next Thursday. Track which day I'm on here. And the idea here is we'll just look at it from a completeness perspective. If there's anything that comes to mind between now and next week, take a picture of it if you want. And then we'll go into a use case. So the idea is, and this is where we get this sequence step by step. We'll pick one of these use cases and then write out the use case for it.
Okay.
So in writing out that first use case is actually really helpful for testing. Did we miss something in the use case diagram? So it's always good to say, okay, here's the use case diagram, but in order to like proof check it, try doing a use case. See what pops out of there. So we're all the way into requirement space. So this is good. Oh, it's 3:44. Okay, clock was on.